It is my pleasure to welcome you. Great to see you back after hopefully not too hot of a summer. The Kent Kennedy Institute is a multidisciplinary institute on campus focused on data and computation. We're very pleased to have our speaker here today. We'll get back to our speaker. We host a number of lectures, and if you've watched the slide deck up here, this is the fall lectures and lineup. So I hope maybe you took notes and maybe other things. If you're not on our mailing list and you would like to be on our mailing list, you can go to our web pages. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and you get notices. So appreciate that. And our partner today is the Louis Idea Lab. Really excited about that, to have them in this joint lecture series focused on technology and entrepreneurship and innovation. And the motivation for doing it was really around what's going on in Houston and sort of the transformation of Houston, and sort of the focus on Houston is really a tech city. Missed on many. Often if you haven't been here, you don't understand Houston. At least I didn't before I came here, but I've been here 30 years now, so I'm starting to understand it. But that is something that we, getting together around that and bringing focus on that. And so working with the Louis Idea Lab on kind of bringing that together, and then bringing some of our alums back that actually have left the city and done entrepreneurship moves and whatnot, and have them come back and sort of also help us drive in that. So that's all I'm going to say. It's my pleasure to invite my colleague, Ashu Sabharwal, the chairman of the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department, to do introduction of our speaker today. Ashu?
I got a free applause. So, how's everybody doing? All right, very good. Yeah. So, good afternoon. I am just delighted to introduce Vinay Pai. It's always a pleasure and pride that when our alums visit us, tell us about their success stories, and in the process, inspire all our younger generation and also some of the older ones too. So Vinay is an experienced technology executive with a great track record on both the technical and business leadership in both building and growing businesses worldwide. As one of the major milestones, he's just invited to be part of Forbes Technology Council since last year. That's a way of recognizing your leadership in the community. Currently, he is a senior vice president of engineering at Billcom and building all their technology pipelines, and in fact, building all the technology teams. Prior to Billcom, he was a senior vice president of engineering at First Data. Before that, he worked with Intuit and developed their developer platform. And then he also held engineering leadership roles at Cassett, Sun Microsystems, Berger, founded a startup. And if you're wondering what he was doing before that, he was at Rice, collecting lots of degrees. He has a master's in electrical and computer engineering and a double major in ECS. And whatever he's going to tell you today, we are going to take credit for all his success. With that, let's welcome Vinay.
All right, thanks, Ashu. So it's good to be back on campus. When I was here, this building did not exist. Martell College did not exist. I was at Jones. Martell used to be a parking lot, or our softball field, or the tennis court, one of those. So it's good to be back in Duncan Hall. Before I get into the talk, I spent some time today with Peter Varman, who was my research advisor, and we went out to lunch, and then he took me into the hall where we have Elect 326 lab. Now, I graduated in '88, so my projects were building a JK flip-flop and a counter. And then now I realize students these days are building a processor with FPGAs. So anyway, I feel super old, but I will talk to you about payments and then cryptocurrency. So anyway, it's all good. So before going into the topic, I'll talk a little bit about myself. I'll give a quick overview about Bill.com, just so for context it helps with the rest of the talk. We'll talk about digital payments today. I'll talk about card payments. And then there are a couple of interesting techniques coming out for faster payment rails, as well as I will talk about cryptocurrency and blockchain. And so we will get to that. And then we'll have time for questions, I think. So probably got about 30, 40 minutes of talk, and then we'll have Q&A. I remember it was actually in George R. Brown, or no, where was the comp sci stuff? Herman Brown. And I sat way in the back in one of my classes. I was up all night and I actually fell asleep. during the thing, and I got woken up by the professor, like, wake him up. So I won't do that if you're in the back sleeping. I know it's midterms are coming up and stuff. But okay, so about me, I was born in Bombay. Family moved to the U.S. Very early. When I was 4, we lived in New York City. Then in '78, yes, in 6th grade, we moved to Houston. So I've lived in Houston for about 13 years, through junior high, high school, college, and grad school. But then since 2000, I've been in California. I got a few degrees here at Rice. I was in the PhD program. I did pass my quals, but I didn't go on to finish my PhD. I took a leave of absence and never came back, but I guess I come back and talk to you about cryptocurrency, so here I am. This is my family. My wife, Arthi, sitting next to me. All the way on the left is my son, Naveen, and then my daughter, Nina, is all the way on the right. So I was Jones, '88. Nina came back to Rice. She also graduated, she did biochem. She had a higher GPA than me. She graduated in 2016. She was also at Jones. Also, my brothers were here at Rice as well. They went on to do their PhDs. I did not, so I'm the black sheep of the family. But my son paved his own way. He's in CMU. He's a junior there studying CS. But he's doing like super theoretical CS stuff. I was more ECE. I like building things. So anyway, a little bit about me and the family. Let's talk about early years of my career. So from Rice, I graduated in '88. I really loved our 90-degree weather Septembers. I thought, okay, I've lived in Texas a long time. Let's go see, what the rest of the U.S. looks like. So I picked the farthest place I could of the offers I had, and I went to Minnesota, and I worked at IBM. That first year was a little soul-crushing, and I decided to come back to grad school. I left Rice thinking I was going to set the world on fire, and I realized I'm pretty bored, and I came back to grad school. So I came back in '89, and then actually graduated in '91, and then I went to Schlumberger. So I'd gotten married at the time. Arthi and I moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, worked there for 4 years. I worked on software for hydraulic fracturing. I can tell you all about that. Then I moved to Austin, worked on some stuff for seismic. Then eventually moved to Paris, France. That was in '97 to 2000. Led a small engineering team there in Paris. At the time, I decided to build out a team in India. So started building a team in Bombay. And so for that last year, Naveen was born in 1999. For the first year of his life, I spent like every other month, I was either going to Bombay or to Houston. So like I look at videos from back then, and I'm like constantly jet lagged and constantly sick. But around 2000, I said, okay, I'm a software guy. What am I doing working in an oil company? So I headed west. I headed very far west. I came to Sun Microsystems in the Bay Area. So I either wanted to work on I was a C++ Windows developer. So I either wanted to go to Microsoft, work on Visual Studio, or I wanted to go to Sun and work on Java. And my wife's parents were in Virginia, so I felt like I had to go interview at AOL in Virginia. It's a good thing I didn't go there, but I ended up in the Bay Area. So I was at Sun for almost 5 years, worked on enterprise Java, made like no money, but it was nice to see that, because that was like the dot-com days and the dot-com burst, and it was great, but it was nice to look back and you see like, half of the folks working on Java and the other half working on the wrong language, so it's all good. Sorry, meaning C#, sorry, all you .NET folks, it's fine, little tongue-in-cheek humor. But around 2004, end of 2004, I left Sun. I followed my general manager to a startup called Casat. It was called utility computing, so it was the early days of cloud computing. We actually pitched to Amazon when they were building EC2 in 2007, and in the meeting, I could see it kind of slipping away. Werner Vogels had just joined as their CTO. They had bought Alexa Internet, and we're doing this pitch because we did server management, storage, networking, and I can see him going, build, buy, partner, and like, okay, I see 100 people here. We're going to build this. So you can see the deal slipping away. Anyway, Amazon started building their data centers, so I knew we were getting leapfrogged because why build your own private cloud when you can rent the cloud? So I happened to coach Y basketball. My son was in 3rd grade at the time. I coached with a guy named Paul Gibson. Our boys were both in 3rd grade. So Sam and Naveen Naveen played point guard, Sam played power forward. We hooked up at the end of the season. And that's how I got to Paycycle. I knew nothing about online payroll. I'd never run a SaaS operation. So my character reference was I never yelled at the boys. So I figured as a coach, I never wanted to yell at someone else's kid because I didn't want anyone yelling at my kids. So anyway, I got to Paycycle because of Y-Ball, and they were talking to my old team from Sun. In the Valley, they say a lot of stuff happens through luck, and it's really true because I feel like I work really hard at Sun. I work really hard at Casat, but it was the luck and timing of going to Paycycle, and we were growing that business, and we sold it to Intuit in 2009. And that was actually very life-changing. So Paycycle was founded by a guy named Vinay Pai. Remember that name because I'm going to come back to it. So at Intuit, had a chance to lead different engineering teams. At one point, I led like a 700-person team. I had a team in Mountain View and then in Bangalore, Brazil. I actually still have like 8 years left on my visa for Brazil, Canada, London. And what's neat is like, so I don't have an MBA. I'm like an engineer. I used to write code a long time ago. And so you can move into management and contribute to the business. My last role there was the GM for the developer platform. So at the time, I worked with this company called Bill.com. So Eric Chan, who's there, Eric, say hi. He is our CTO, practically co-founder, been there 13 years. So they were one of the first apps that integrated to QuickBooks Online, accounting software. So got to work with the engineering team. Their CEO is a guy named Vinay Pai. I'd worked at his previous company. Then I was at First Data, payments company. And then December, Renee and I used to always catch up like every 6 months. So we caught up for drinks skiing at North Star. Well, actually, I don't ski at North Star. I ski at Squaw Valley. That's actually better. North Star kind of easy. Renee skis at North Star. That's fine. But we had drinks. And so he asked me about, he told me about the changes he's making at Bill.com, wants to scale the company, looking for a new engineering leader. And so he goes, "You know anyone?" I go, "Yeah, I'll refer myself." So I referred myself. That was a couple of Decembers ago, and that's how I joined Bill.com. So, I joke, but it's actually true. I joined Bill.com because I liked the product. So when we were at Paycycle, we used Bill.com for our accounts payable and document management. So I used Bill.com and QuickBooks Online. I did not like QuickBooks. That was the thing I later led into it. So had a chance to fix that. But I love the product at Bill.com. I worked with the people. So Renee was on the board at Paycycle. Jackie Hendy, who led HR at Paycycle, we're working together at Bill.com. So I knew a lot of the people. I knew some of the, I didn't know Eric, but I knew Enrique, who led product at the time, spent a lot of time with us. So, and then my son, when he was in high school, he used to code. And so he did 2 internships at Bill.com, and he had code in production from both summers. So, when you start as an intern, a lot of times the first month you're just figuring out how to get your dev environment set up. It was like a couple of days for him. He had code checked into production his first month. So he did my due diligence. So the platform checked out. So I like the product, the people, and the platform, and that's how I got to Bill.com. So I'll give you a quick overview of Bill.com. So if you look at the world today, in the US, there are 6 million employers. These are folks that have employees, but out of that 6 million, most of that, like 5.5, actually make less than $100 million a year in revenue, probably have less than 100 employees. And that's our sweet spot. That's who we sell to. Anyone that needs to manage their back office, manage their bills. And then there's another 21 million kind of self-employed gig economy people. And then globally, there's another 125 million businesses. So we don't go after the Exxons or the Schlumbergers, but we go after like Tiff's Treats and Buffalo Bayou Brewing. They're some of our customers here. So if you look globally, small businesses spend $58 trillion on bill payment. And it's going to grow to like 200 trillion across small businesses and enterprises. But if you look at the far right, okay, oh, there we go. All right, now I feel legit. All right, so most of that people, the 58 trillion that small businesses spend, 42 trillion of that is on paper checks. This is like 2019. People are still mailing checks around for their business expenses. 11 trillion is actually on ACH. Those are bank payments. A small fraction on card, and 2 trillion on other stuff. So I'm going to focus on what we're doing to convert a lot of this check stuff to this other stuff. And as you get to here, there's card and crypto and all sorts of other payment types that I'm going to talk about. So a little bit of the business landscape today. So how many of you have heard of Square, a payments company? They do about $140, $160 billion a year in payments volume. We do 70. Yeah, so we're about half the size of Square in terms of our digital payment volume, and I'm not counting checks. So we do about 60 million bills and invoices a year. Our customers are uploading 4 million documents a month into our platform. 2 million of those are invoices. We do 1 million payment transactions a month. So there's a very rich data set that we're managing. So we've been partners of the Rice D2K Institute. So met Ginevra Allen probably 2 years ago when we were considering Houston, or a year ago when we were considering Houston as our location. She talked to us about the D2K Institute. So we're a Tukey sponsor. Tukey, right? Or Gauss, Tukey, one of the two. The higher one. Which one is that? Gauss. Okay, we're a Gauss sponsor. Good, because I knew who Gauss was, but Tukey sounded like turkey, so I figure for another 10K we get better brand recognition. So we're a Gauss sponsor. Although, funny joke, is vector calc still Math 212? Is it any students in the room? Like a vector calc. Anyway, it was Math 212 when I took it, and the last week was like a blur. So I confused Gauss's law, Stokes' law, and Green's law, and I just had to randomly guess on the final. I still got an A, but it was every time Gauss sponsorship, that's what comes to my mind is Gauss's law, and I think to this date I still don't know it. But okay. Our customers are these SMBs that we sell to directly. We also sell through accountants. So 70 of the top 100 accounting firms use our products. So, back in the days, like, so for millennials, you won't get this, but remember moonlighting? Sybil Shepherd, Bruce Willis, her accountant ran off with all her money because he had direct access to her bank account. Well, with our product, you don't get that. So you can have an accountant manage your money, like for your small business. They set up your payments, you approve them. They never touch your bank account. It goes digitally from your bank account to your vendors. So you'll never have an accountant run away with your money. One of our high-profile customers is a retired basketball player from the Chicago Bulls, arguably much better than LeBron. So anyway, his accountant uses our stuff to manage his money, and he's in charge of his money. So, and then we also have banks. So Chase, Bank of America, American Express, Silicon Valley Bank, Commerce Bank, they're also our partners. We do the bill pay for their businesses, integrate into their product, and they're also investors. And then finally, we are headquartered in Palo Alto, and we just opened a Houston office last week. We had the mayor, Sylvester Turner, out there. We did a ribbon cutting. It's Wednesday, the day before Imelda, so that was actually, he declared that Bill.com Day. It's good that he didn't declare September 19th Bill.com Day, because that was Imelda Day. But we all flew out of town, a little bit delayed on Thursday, but made it back. We had a reception here at Cohen House that Wednesday evening with President Lebron and a bunch of folks. So we're very happy to be part of the Houston ecosystem. It's nice to be back at Rice. I feel super old, but anyway, that's so every time, I guess it's common, like you get older, but students stay about the same age. So as you walk around campus, you just like.
We get older, they're all same age.
Yeah, right? It's, anyway, so for some of you in the room can relate. All right. Okay, real quickly, there are 4 kind of workflows that we deal with. We have, if you're a small business, you get a bill, it's usually an invoice. So Renee Lessard, our CEO, when he was running Paycycle, every Friday, he would walk around with a manila folder full of invoices and figure out, is this one real? Can I pay this now or can I wait? So there's a whole office workflow of receiving bills, approving them, and then paying them that we automate. And then finally reconciling that with your accounting software. We do the integration to a bunch of accounting platforms, QuickBooks, Xero, NetSuite, and Sage Intact. So very high level architecture really. But so we're built on a lot of the same back end that Salesforce, kind of enterprise grade SaaS platforms use. Oracle database. We've got some stuff that we're doing with native cloud enablement, so we're moving to AWS. We were founded 13 years ago, so we're in 3 data centers. That's just what you had to do back then. Startups these days, you go either to Google Cloud or Azure or to AWS. and then maybe 0.5% of them go to Oracle Cloud. I don't even know if that thing's real. Sorry if there are any Oracle people in the room, but that's your market share. All right. So we've got a layer, pretty standard on the SaaS platform. A couple of things that we have is we have a machine learning engine integrated into the platform. We have document management. Remember those 4 million documents a month customers are uploading, and then we have a network graph. So we have close to 2 million customers and their customers that are actually either paid or get paid through our network. 2 million invoices a month that are getting uploaded. We actually have a bunch of stuff where we can predict, hey, are the tariffs hurting small businesses? What states are growing? What states are shrinking? What are people buying? But we do this in a way that this is to help our businesses, so we'll never resell data and stuff. So we're not an ad platform. On top of that SaaS platform, we have workflow and collaboration. We have a payments engine. This payments engine, I'm going to spend some time talking about the different payment types that are out there. We do payables, receivables. We've added international payments, card payments. It's the same product that is served up through direct customers, accountants, the financial institutions, and we have a developer API with about 100 apps that integrate with us, and then direct integration at QuickBooks Online, web, native mobile. I think that's probably the last kind of product pitchy thing that I have, but that's just a quick overview of Bill.com. So let me talk about how digital payments today happen. Remember, that was a small sliver, about 20% of that total spend. Most of it was still checks. So when you're a buyer and you have a vendor, you need to pay them. So common forms of payment today, and I'm going to talk about all 4 of these. You have good old-fashioned checks, still primarily in the US. Most countries outside the US have abolished checks and have lots of direct banking stuff. Like Jan is from Norway. You've probably never seen a check until you came here, right?
Oh, I did.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, but they don't.
I'm old too.
Well, okay, but they don't have checks anymore, right?
No.
No checks. Same in the UK, right? So anyway, in the US, we have good old-fashioned checks. Been around for like 100 years, probably. But ACH, I'll talk a bit about this. This is a form of digital payments between banks. You have the federal wire transfer system. If you ever have to buy a house and you need to wire your money, you're probably forking over $30 to do that wire. And then you have credit cards. So those have been around about 30 years, but I will explain how all 4 of those types work today, and then sort of talk about the future of where this is headed. Okay, so the automated clearinghouse, it's managed by an association called NACHA. And it's really the backbone of online banking today. So pretty much every bank, treasury, savings and loan, credit union, they're all part of NACHA. And it's an association of these banks. There are about 30 primary banks that are in there. They have a board, they have a governance. It is a .org. And then what NACHA does is it facilitates debit or credit transactions between banks. Now, to give you an idea of how rocket sciencey this is, everything is managed through an ACH file that is a fixed 80-column format. And so you have from bank routing number, the ABA routing number, from bank account number to the ABA routing number to account number and the amount. And it's a fixed 80-column format back from the days of VTs, terminals and stuff. How many of you actually know what a VT terminal is? All right, all the old people in the room, all good. So anyway, look it up. It's probably in a computer history museum somewhere. But ACH files are still in existence today. So that's how all of your, anytime you do consumer bill pay through your bank account, it's going through ACH. So ACH file, there are several windows throughout the day. 7 a.m., 10 a.m., 5 p.m., 7 p.m. And so you have, so for example, when we run ACH, we go through a bank, either Chase or Bancorp, Silicon Valley Bank, PNC, and we send them an ACH file securely. They process it, and then they do the deduction from that file. They do the money movement, and the stuff gets recorded in the next 2 days. A single transaction takes 2 days to settle. And so the idea is I submit a ACH file today, that money will get debited from my bank account the next day, and there's usually 1 more day before the funds finally settle and are considered good funds. So speed of this payment type, not so great. You can kind of do next day payment, where but it's really a 2-day kind of thing. And then if you're doing a complex like transaction, it's usually 2 days or 4 days. So like for example, when you get paid, how many get paid on a Friday? All right, I get paid on Friday. So company has to schedule your payroll usually on Monday, because it takes 2 days to take the money from their bank account to the payroll processor and 2 days from the payroll processor to you. Now, when you become a better creditor, they can overlap some of those legs, so you can do it in 2 days. So you usually have to submit your payroll either on a Monday or on a Wednesday to get paid on a Friday, and that's because of the speed of ACH. And by the way, this is the majority of digital transactions today. Now, the Federal Reserve System for wires is much faster, and it's more instantaneous, and you can move large amounts. You can move millions of dollars. ACH generally has limits of like $100,000 a transaction, and then depending on, like for example, your brokerage might have a higher limit, but then they're manually taking a little more risk on you. The federal wire transfer system goes directly bank to bank through a parallel system, not using these files. It's probably using something even older, like COBOL and mainframes and stuff. But those are typically like $30 fees. So for the most part, ACH is way more common than wires. There are a few things like when you buy a house, you have to go through a wire to your bank. All right, so let's talk about card payments. So credit cards have been around for a long time. Diners Club was the first card ever created. All right. Okay. I never had. Did you have a Diners Club? You still have one? Okay. So if you watch Mad Men, anyone watch Mad Men on TV? So you remember they talk about their Diners Club card. So that was a card network that was created like in the 50s or 60s. So in card payment ecosystem, there are lots of different actors in the ecosystem. And so when you look at the payment space and you look at fintech, there are lots of places you can play in this space. And then you can look at different parts of the value chain and say, I'm going to automate that or I'm going to disrupt that. But there's a huge ecosystem. So first, you have card holders, and they get a credit card from an issuing bank. So for example, any of these banks, Chase, Bank of America, Citi, Amex, FleetCor, Silicon Valley Bank, PNC, I listed the banks that we partner with. They're also our investors. They will issue you a credit card. So for example, when I go sign up for a credit card, that bank is taking a risk saying, okay, how much money am I going to float Vinay? Maybe he's on a great credit risk. I'll start him off at $5,000. So based on that, they're essentially giving me a 28-day loan, so on credit. As they get more data on me, they can increase my credit limit, but essentially they're issuing a short-term loan for me. Now, when I go buy something and I go into like coffee shop and there's a point of sale system, or if I go to Amazon and I'm ordering something online, there are the actual merchants on the other end. Now, there's a whole network of how stuff gets routed from the card holder to the merchant, and money moves back and forth. So let's start on the networks themselves. So MasterCard, Visa, American Express, Discover, those are the big four networks in the US. You still have Diners Club, primarily in Europe. You have JCB, primarily overseas. And like China, Union Pay is actually Discover. Now, the important thing of these networks, they help connect cardholders and merchants. And all they do is move money, and they take a little cut of that. I mean, it's a very interesting problem. So, and it's a great network effect. The more cardholders you have on like MasterCard and the more merchants you have accepting MasterCard, it makes MasterCard more valuable. Same with Visa or Amex. So, typically these are all separate networks maintained by the cards, and then they have to get people enrolled on both sides. Now, in between the network and the merchant, you have a merchant acquirer. And it's actually another bank that is offering you card services. So for example, Jan creates his Swedish coffee shop? Norwegian. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Okay, Norwegian coffee shop. Are those fighting words?
No.
Okay, all right. Okay, so so when he signs up, he has to say, okay, I've got my bank, I'm at Wells Fargo, and I'm going to sign up for payment processing. So he has a bunch of things he can pick from. He can go to Square and sign up online, or he can get an old-fashioned account from First Data or Vantiv, which is now WorldPay. Adyen is new in the space. You can also sign up for merchant processing through QuickBooks or Stripe. So all of these folks are saying, I will allow you to take credit cards, and then I will route through the network back to the issuer. So let me show you how that works. All right, so I tailored this up for a rice example. So I figured, okay, Sammy the Owl is going to take, well, it can't take all of us. Let's say he's taking all of the ECE faculty and CS faculty in the room out to dinner at Hugo's, which happens to be my favorite Mexican restaurant in Houston. It's now turning into a Bill.com kind of hangout place, but say it's $1,000 for dinner. All right, so out of that $1,000, there's typically 2.5% that the merchant is going to pay for the ability to take credit. So at the end of the day, Hugo's is only going to get $975 from that transaction, and it usually gets settled 1 to 2 days after you have done the transaction. So now here's all the different economics in there. So Hugo's, when they sign up, let's say they use Square. They have picked Square as their merchant acquirer. There's already a negotiated discount rate, so they're going to pay 2.5% to Square. Now, out of that 2.5%, Square keeps about 45 basis points. Okay, so a basis point is 1/100th of a percentage point. So 100 basis points equals 1 percentage point. You can also abbreviate basis points as bips. So if you want to sound cool when you're hanging out with your Jones School MBA friends and say, yes, the other day I found out that Square charges 45 bips. It makes that much margin. So you'll sound super cool. Okay, Square is keeping 45 bips. Now, out of that 250, there's still another 205. So the card issuer keeps the majority of that. So remember, that card issuer is giving you a loan. So they're saying, okay, Sammy the Owl, I'm going to give Sammy the Owl 28 days of float for that $1,000. So the card issuer keeps about 1.84% or 184 bips of that interchange. Now, the card network actually keeps about 14 bips. All they're doing is connecting the bank account from the cardholder to the bank account providing the payment services and saying, okay, every transaction that goes through there, I'm keeping 14 bips. So the way it works, I show up, and the first thing they do is run my card, and you get an authorization. So it says, okay, Sammy the Owl is good for $1,000. Here's the authorization code. And then you will see that as like pending on your credit card statement. You usually see things that are pending for a day or two, and there's a final step of settlement where now the merchant goes through here, goes to Square, gets an auth code, and now that a transaction is guaranteed, they then separately through Square run all this stuff. Square runs it through the network back to the cardholder. The card issuer says, here's the $975 that I'm going to settle, and that process is called settlement, and that usually takes 1 to 2 days. So credit card transactions still take about 1 to 2 days to settle out. And there is a complex network of like the card networks, the merchant acquirers, as well as the card issuers that all participate in that space. In the last year, there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the space. So like card payments are like super hot and cool right now, or super cool. Yes, fine. Can't be hot and cool at the same time. Okay. So now let's talk about faster payment rails. So remember, everything I talked about is kind of like 1 to 2 days. There are batch files floating around. There are card networks from like the 60s that still are in existence. There are all these different players. And so you think about like software today, and you think there's probably got to be a better way. So let me talk to you about some different payment rails that exist. So there are ways to do instant payments. So first, let me talk about debit rails. So if you sign up with Uber as a driver, by the way, I don't drive for Uber, I'm just using this example. So Uber, you sign up and they say, okay, I'm going to pay you to your wallet. And I will pay you, I'll deposit stuff in your wallet every time you drive. And then every 2 weeks, I'll give you a paycheck and it gets swept into your bank account. But Uber also says, hey, if you want to pay yourself today, say you've got a big dinner coming up and you need a little extra money, you can hook up your debit card to your account and then deduct money to out of your wallet to your debit card and go straight to your bank account the same day. So debit is an instantaneous system. It also runs through the card networks. It's a little bit faster, and it's always associated with a debit card that is connected directly to your bank account. So Transactions can be debits or credits. They're instantaneous. So at the time you do the transaction, it's a real-time API call through the MasterCard and Visa. Both have debit rails platforms. You get like instantaneous verification that the funds exist, and then once you deduct it, they land in your bank account like within a few minutes. So you're always in kind of a good funds model. You never have to worry about that 2 days for funds to settle on ACH. And so this is it's interesting. Debit cards started off in a very different way, as a cheaper way to give someone a piece of plastic, but without giving them a 28-day loan. So there's some really novel uses of debit cards to do instantaneous payments that are popping up. Uber is a great use case. And then on debit cards, they also charge you a small convenience fee. Pay yourself when you want, and it's 50 cents. So there's a lot of monetization that you can build into a card payments ecosystem. All right, so there is, so remember that Nacha thing that I talked about a few slides ago, 2-day settlements, 80-column ACH files being processed at fixed windows throughout the day, very 1940s, 1950s mainframe style, and they're all running on mainframes. There's another network popping up called RealTime Payments. It's RTP. It is also an association of banks. It is a .org. And all of these banks have to opt into it. The difference with RTP is they have real-time APIs for actually moving money. So Jan is looking at this stuff and saying, we've had this in Europe for 10 years. It's called SWIFT, right? Okay, so put that aside, but it's true. The US is very slow to catch up in banking, and it's very slow to catch up in mobile phones and also in cable. Like we have the crappiest infrastructure in all three of those areas compared to any country in the world, for the most part. So this is novel for us right now, and it's not even fully rolled out. So today, there are a bunch of banks. How many of you have Chase for online banking? All right. Have you tried to do a money transfer on Chase, and then now it's presenting you this option? So Ashu, you have Chase, right? Have you seen that RTP option?
This is Zelle or something?
Well, so Zelle is a consumer and it's on the phone, but like RTP is a direct interface to the bank. And so Chase now has this option that you can do slow ACH, 2 days, kind of up to 100,000, or they'll let you do $5,000 through RTP. So, and it's very new. They just rolled this out a couple of weeks ago. So with RTP, it's only credits, so you can only pay someone. Banks want to make it slow. They're like casinos in Vegas. Like, generally you can have all these automated sidewalks taking you into a casino. They want you to stay there. When you're done, you walk out on your own 2 feet, So same way right now, banks will let you do instantaneous payments to them. But right now, if you want to get money out of a bank, it's still 2-day ACH. So RTP today only does push transactions. They do credits. Debits are coming later in the year. And so the cool thing about RTP is it's an API call. You know that the funds are there. So if you want to pay for that $1,000 transaction through RTP, the funds are validated. They're go ahead and you get the money, and then you can push it into the account. So it's an instantaneous transaction. It's also lower risk, and it's better from a fraud perspective. So RTP is getting rolled out. It's interesting because when you start thinking of smaller payments, like less than $5,000, this will probably be the predominant means of going forward with payments. You'll still have checks and wires and ACH, but you're going to see more adoption for RTP, and maybe one day we'll catch up to Europe, right?
Yeah, maybe.
All right. I thought about wearing a long sleeve shirt and everything, but I knew it'd be like 90 degrees on campus, and I was trying to figure out what Jan is going to be wearing today, because he always has these like super hip shirts. So I figured I went Hawaiian. So try to be cool. What's that?
You win.
Okay, awesome. All right, so your clicker. All right, okay, so let's talk about crypto and blockchain. So Bitcoin started off a long time ago. It started off in 2009 for anonymous commerce. So people wanted to buy things on the internet that they didn't want any track of. It's usually drugs and illegal things, and that's where the origins of Bitcoin were. There's all these noble aspirations that it's about, transforming commerce and, disrupting governments, but it started off as people wanting to buy illegal things and not getting tracked. So that was the origin of Bitcoin. But what people figured out is it's a great investment vehicle. And limited number of Bitcoin that are always issued, and it's the same for any crypto. You have a fixed supply. The price is set by market demands, and so as more people want to buy, the price of these things skyrockets. In 2009, I had a guy in my team in Intuit that actually bought some Bitcoin. I think at like $3 a coin, and I thought he's crazy. Like who's going to pay $3 for an imaginary currency? And then turns out it started taking off in price, and so Ashu, this guy took off a 6-month leave of absence for hiking the Appalachian Trail, and he never came back. So it was a good call for him back then. So yeah, I mean, if I had bought a bunch of Bitcoin back then, I guess I'd have like my name on one of these buildings or something. But it was a good call if you got in way back then. So this is a graph of Bitcoin over the last 2 years. So it started off at like 2,500, went up to like almost 22,000, dropped a bit and oscillated. And this graph would be great if you're like a mountain climber or like an aggressive skier. But I think I bought somewhere around here, in my FOMO moment. So I'm going to be working for a long time, but it was just a little bit of an experiment. And so, there are other coins that have come up. You have Litecoin and Ethereum, and there were a whole wave of initial coin offerings like a year and a half ago. Anyone hear of an ICO these days? I mean, it's pretty much dead, So the interesting thing is Bitcoin is kind of like pets.com, from 1999 and kind of the early days of Webvan and the internet. A lot of these things were kind of a flash in the pan, but a lot of the technology that you needed to deliver these things persisted. So if you think about web technology and SaaS and web apps and mobile apps, all of that stuff started off in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and a lot of those companies disappeared, but the technologies around. So you're seeing a lot of that same thing happen with Bitcoin and different cryptos. So one issue with Bitcoin, because of the distributed ledger and how like the people that mine coins work, the transaction times are very long. It can take 30 minutes for a transaction, and then it can actually take about $30 in processing cost, like say you use Coinbase or something. So transactions are slow and they're expensive. Now, if you read Jack Dorsey, CEO of Square and Twitter, he talks a lot about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and like you can, Square point of sale, actually, you can go pay for your latte with Bitcoin. Now, you would be crazy to do that because of the transaction costs and the fact that there's so much volatility. So even in the 30 minutes or even the few minutes to process that transaction, the price can fluctuate wildly. So for the most part, Bitcoin has never actually emerged as a reliable commerce means. It's actually really turned into more of an investment vehicle, mostly for speculation. I remember I went to this Money 2020 conference in Vegas a year and a half ago. Eric, at that time we were there last year. And I was taking an Uber, from McCarran Airport to the hotel, and my Uber driver starts talking to me about cryptocurrency. And I'm like, okay, Uber driver in Vegas talking to me about crypto. Like, that's like the peak of the bubble, I mean, and it really was. But for the most part, the actual speculative value has eroded a lot, but there's a lot of stuff underneath it, the distributed ledger technology and particularly blockchain that has persisted. Now, there are a couple of new coin developments that have emerged. So we've been talking to Ripple. They're a startup in San Francisco. They introduced a coin called XRP. Now, the challenge with blockchain or any distributed ledger is because you have so many copies of this and you have mining, people that mine it, transactions take a long time and the throughput is limited and the costs are expensive. So what Ripple said is we will have a private blockchain, which is kind of an oxymoron. So like they're the only keepers of their blockchain for XRP, but the transaction costs are very low and the actual transaction times are sub 1 minute. And so the XRP is the coin that they launched. This is about 1.5 years ago. And the idea with XRP is it is still a dynamic currency. It has a value. It's fluctuated from about $1 to $8 and keeps oscillating in that range. The idea is that XRP is convertible to other currencies. So XRP is convertible to euros, probably even Norwegian kroners, Indian rupees, and they have a bunch of exotic currencies in there as well. So there have been a bunch of banks that are using, Ripple has a platform called XRapid that allows you to do international payments using XRP. Now, there are lots of ways to do international payments. You can bridge, the federal wire transfer system, local ACH to SWIFT, and to other currencies and local banking systems. XRP is a way that looks at using a crypto coin as a settlement vehicle. So you would take your dollar amount, you end up buying XRP in the platform. That XRP persists for a little while, and then it is converted instantaneously to the currency you want in the destination format. And for the most part, it has been one of these things that every bank has kind of a proof of concept on it. If you look at the majority of international payments, they're over traditional rails today. So we actually looked at Ripple and XRP and kicked the tires a little bit, but there's some I'll tell you a story. So last year, I created an emerging tech group within my engineering team. I wanted some space to experiment on fintech and blockchain and coins. So Eric, a guy named Hari, a guy named Joel, I created this thing called Blockchain Fridays. And so we set aside 2 hours every Friday. I bought lunch, and we would talk about stuff that was happening in the crypto space. And when I say we, it's really them that did the work, but I paid for the lunch. So maybe I have potential as a university professor. All right. I'm kidding. Actually, I don't. I don't have a PhD. I guess I'd have to get that. I have fewer brain cells these days. It's hard. I could barely do 184 bips of interchange. I have to do round numbers like $1,000 to make it easy. But so anyway, back to Blockchain Fridays. So Eric and Hari and Joel started prototyping on Ethereum. We actually used a private variant of Ethereum. We started looking at recording transactions on Ethereum. We used Hyperledger Fabric. The premise was, let's build a wallet, have it backed by a blockchain. And what's interesting is, so the fact that you've got a distributed ledger in some ways is actually less secure. It's all about transparency. So if you own a coin, you can track the history of that coin. You can do like provenance of like chain of custody. But if you want to do financial transactions, you can reverse engineer a company's general ledger or their profit and loss or all their transactions. If you know what are the transaction amounts in your vendors, you can totally reverse engineer a company's financials on blockchain. So, you're probably not going to see blockchain for accounting systems and even payment systems. In some sense, it's actually not secure if you use it in its native form. If you do things to obfuscate the wallet IDs on either end of the transaction, you kind of lose the benefits of having transparency. So there's really no reason to do it on blockchain. What we learned in that process is you can do wallets without blockchain. Like, who has a Venmo account? Anyone got money parked in Square Cash? PayPal? Okay, any of those have a blockchain? I know, right? You just trust that PayPal's probably secure, Venmo's pretty secure, they're owned by PayPal. So, you can trust that you've got some of your actual currency parked in a completely ethereal form in some wallet within a company that has no audit trail, but you trust them. So it's interesting. As we started thinking about that, we thought, and I had, when I was last summer, we had a board meeting and dinner at our CEO's house, and I told them, hey, we should issue a stable value coin. We can make it a BDC coin. Our CEO just bought this dog, so we could put a picture of his dog on the coin. It'd be like Doja Coin 2.0, and the board was like, nah, who would actually ever want to do a stable value coin? And fast forward to today, like earlier this year, JP Morgan launched a coin. So last year, JP Morgan started their own blockchain called Quorum. So the issue was you don't want to have a blockchain that anyone can participate and mine on it. So they created their own enterprise blockchain called Quorum. They said you have to get approved to actually join their network. And then as a result of that, they actually, Jamie Dimon went on to bash blockchain and crypto in general. What they did was earlier this year, they launched the JPM coin. So it is a fixed value coin, always mapped to $1. It is backed by assets that JP Morgan has. It's independently audited. So the idea is you can now have a coin that speeds up all your transactions. So you remember the 1 or 2 day settlement for credit cards, the 2 days for any leg of an ACH transaction, the RTP, you always have to connect from one bank account to another. You have to have people participate in that network. The idea with stable value coins is if you could have a JPM coin, you can park it in an account, in a wallet, or like a JP Morgan might have a wallet. It actually has fixed value. It's audited. It's as good as currency and possibly better than currency, because for the most part, currency is not really audited or regulated. Governments can issue more money. You have things like the Fed that control it, but anyone can print money at any time if they wanted to. So in some sense, a stable value coin is very interesting. If I think back to all the different crypto types, this will probably persist. Now, so all the banks and the regulators, are talking to JP Morgan. It's actually kind of cool that a bank actually introduced a stable value coin. But earlier this year, among other fiascos, Facebook launched their own coin. So around the time that they settled with the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, for a $5 billion fine for violating privacy, and they launched Libra. Now, the concept is actually super cool. So Libra is an association of 28 different entities. There's a .org tracking Libra. So if you look at the companies participating, you've got MasterCard, you got Visa, you got Stripe, eBay, you have Facebook, you've got Coinbase. It costs $10 million to join Libra.org. You get to be part of the governance. There's a board. It is based on a fixed basket of international currencies. They set a value for Libra. It actually trades relative. It's as its own currency, which is it's an extremely cool concept. There are global assets that are backing it. The supply of Libra. They created a Calibra, which is their wallet. If you notice in this list, there are no banks participating, and there are no governments. So the thing that Facebook screwed up when they launched this is they didn't bother talking to any governments before the launch or to any banks. They just kind of launched it, and the governments are like, hey, you can't do this. So from the day they've launched it, they've had a different government kind of come out on the record and say, we're going to regulate this. It started off first with the US, and then I think India even said, no crypto for anyone, you had Korea, China, everyone is, Germany got involved. I guess Germans regulate lots of stuff, right? So everyone is kind of on the attack against Libra. And what's ended up happening is some of these companies are like, hey, I don't know if I really want to be part of this thing. So they're starting to pull out of the Libra.org. The concept is actually very cool. So, you had JP Morgan issue a JPM coin. You have Facebook launch a .org to have a crypto that's a stable value crypto. Goldman Sachs has said they're going to launch a coin. China has actually said they're going to launch a coin. So the concept of stable value crypto is very promising, and we think it's actually going to be around for a while. Now, it's kind of early innings in the crypto thing. I think the ICOs are all gone. Bitcoin and Ethereum, mostly speculation. If I fast forward 12, 18 months, there's a lot of promise for these stable value coins, and that's what we think is going to be around. So I do think I'm like over time, so I'm right at 5. So how are we doing? Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we'll have a couple of questions.
All right.
Let me reach back here first. And then
Thank you, that was great. So you mentioned something right at the end about Libra and it being backed by global assets. Exactly what does that mean? That's one. And the other one, the takeaway I got was you mentioned how most payment platforms actually are not blockchain. And I thought that was the low-hanging fruit for blockchain. So.
Well, so I guess I'll answer the first part of the question. So like with a stable value coin, you have to show that you have assets equivalent to the number of coins you issue, and that if you're going to issue more coins, you create more assets in there. What's that?
liquid assets?
Yeah, cash, any kind of security, something that has value. It's usually, so the way Libra has done it is they bought a bunch of different assets, probably from the $10 million fees and other fees they put in, and said, okay, if I'm going to issue $280 million of Libra coins at this value, it's backed by this many assets. So as they then decide they're going to issue more coins, they'll have more assets that contribute to it. So the idea is that it's a fixed value. So as part of this, I think they bought a bunch of different currencies. I don't remember which currencies exactly. And then based on the denomination, they said Libra is convertible at this rate. So, and so with JPM coin, JP Morgan has a bunch of assets as well. They can set that aside and say, this is how many JPM coins we'll issue, and it's backed by these assets, and you get an auditor to do it. So the accounting firms are actually excited about this. The thing with blockchain, so you can have wallets, and as long as you trust the entity, you're willing to put money there in your PayPal account. Now it is backed by some Oracle database and their servers and stuff, but you may not have a public record of it outside of your PayPal account. Whereas if you had a blockchain tied to a wallet, and PayPal went away, you could still have those funds available as a coin somewhere else. So as long as you trust PayPal, you're fine parking money there without an independent audit trail.
Question up front.
Okay.
Okay. Given all these players that you see here, there are companies like Google who have huge deep pockets and huge technical capabilities. Are they just going to run over these people in the next 10 years?
So Google is kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the space, right? So the thing is, so I've brothers that worked at Google, I have friends that worked at Google. I've also looked at their financial statements. So the challenge, Google faces the classic innovator's dilemma. So 85% of their revenue comes from selling ads. AdWords or ad platform, like that is like, you can look at their last year's earnings and see how much Google actually makes. So when you add up everything else, everything, the driverless, Google Apps, it's 15%. So the challenge sometimes in Google is, if you're going to launch a new business, if it's not going to make $100 million in revenue, it's not interesting. So when you look at a lot of the innovation in the space, especially in crypto and blockchain, it's happening in startups. Because like in startups, if you can, 100 million in revenue is still great. So I think in Google, the thing, you have to worry about in Google is like, GCP is great, and they're going to go head to head with Amazon and with Azure. It's hard to, even Oracle can't make inroads in that space. But for a lot of business apps and stuff, it's not a financially lucrative problem for Google to solve. Google Apps probably is, but I don't think, given also all of the noise in the space with crypto and all the blowback Facebook's getting, they probably won't enter it.
You said that.
Question in the back there.
Now, I'm speaking for them, so I can say whatever, but that's my point of view.
Question in the back. You said that the Libra is backed by
investments and stable investments, but does the value of the coin go down when the value of the investments goes down?
Yeah,
if it's supposed to be stable value, do they have to, how do you get stable value investments?
Yeah, so JP Morgan's coin is based on the US dollar, so it's always pegged to a dollar. The Libra is a basket of foreign currencies, so when they hold those currencies intrinsically change in value, so that's why the convertibility of Libra varies a little bit, but it's mostly tied to the currencies that they're buying. And then coin values can change if they decide to take away some assets or issue more coins. In a way, it's similar to the same system of like stocks. So like when a company issues new shares, they're diluting the base and the price can drop, but if their earnings increase, there's belief that the company has more value. So the same way, I think on Libra, they're not trying to actually deduct money from it, but because it's this basket of international currencies, the values of those currencies themselves might fluctuate.
Any one more question? Okay, hold on there.
I got it. All right. You're boys in blue, right? You're a Schlumberger guy.
I was, yes. Although I was Dowell Schlumberger, so I was in orange. So.
Okay, yeah. Oil and gas Schlumberger is known as innovators, data guys, and from your standpoint, you went from being coding and very technical into sort of a management role. How do you reverse that? How do you go from somebody in operations and doing work and convincing baby boomers that are the decision makers in oil and gas and energy markets to see the viability and the progression of something as innovative as blockchain?
Yeah, so I worked in software in Schlumberger, and the challenge always was, and for any company, you think about, it goes back to the money they make, and how much money they're making from something. And so like, for example, like the Google example, $100 million business and Google's non-interesting. So even in Schlumberger, like a frac job, you make $60,000, $80,000. So if you're kind of showing savings that can actually translate to what field engineers or regional managers can relate to, if you can get traction for this. So when I was in Dowell Schlumberger, I worked on an OpenGL 3D renderer for wellbore, and to show like, hey, this is like coiled tubing and where it fits in. But I could never get any traction with it because it was cool and it was neat to look at, it was good eye candy, but like it didn't translate to anything. But if you look at like all the sensors that were out there for a frac job or for coiled tubing, anything that you could do to, like closed loop process control, like all day you could get that funded. What's that? Yeah. So like all these companies, the innovator's dilemma is real. So the business you have today always kind of overshadows the new things you're doing. And even, that's why I'd created an emerging tech group a year and a half ago. I wanted to invest in, getting to AWS, doing more on data science and machine learning, and then creating a space to do fintech experimentation. I didn't know where blockchain was going to lead, but I said, okay, I'm going to put 3 engineers on it and create a sandbox where they don't get distracted on other things, see how that turns out. And I killed our blockchain stuff. I saw that the world is backing off from crypto. It's the wrong time right now to push a bunch of blockchain projects. Wait 12 to 18 months when the dust settles, and we know what we need to do to dust it off. So I think if you're in a company where you're trying to, you want to make sure the core business is growing, that you can create a separate space to work on some of these experimental things. And then make sure that you're not spending a lot of resources. That was not my walk-up music, so I don't like whatever that was, but I had different walk-up music in mind. But,
They buy the first beer.
huh?
They buy the first beer.
Okay, it's all good. Although I want Macallan 25, okay? My bar's a little higher, Coors Light is fine, but so my advice would be, there's it was McKinsey, back in like early 2000, created this thing about horizon planning, Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. So what you do is, 70% of your revenue should be from your Horizon 1 kind of projects. Even those are your cash cows. They call it Horizon 1. It's cooler. When you're management consulting, you invent better terminology like that. So your Horizon 1s are getting 70% of your revenue, but you put about 20% of your resource behind it. You should have high margin, and you don't really need to do a lot of new investment to grow the business. You can do sales and marketing or more field ops, but you don't need to evolve the product. Your Horizon 2, that's the stuff that you are investing straight up to the margin on. So Horizon 2, even though it's about 20% of your current revenue, it's going to be like your 70%, your Horizon 1s maybe a year from now. And so you put about 70% of your resource on that. So like, for example, a lot of the stuff I talked to you about, international payments, card payments, those were our Horizon 2s. Horizon 1 was like the ACH and the accounts payable. Horizon 2 had a bunch of new payment rails. The stuff that was in Horizon 3 is like your bets. These, you want to put about 10% of your resource on there. You're not worried about generating revenue for the next 12 to 18 months, 24 months if you can pull it off. But you need to be able to experiment quickly and kill things fast if they're not working out, and move on to the next idea. So for us, the blockchain stuff, the wallets, new payment rails were in there. And we weren't too attached to blockchain. It might come back, but that's the way I think to sell it.
On that note, let's thank our speaker again.
All right.
Thank you for coming out, and please join us for a reception outside. We know who is paying for the first drink.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.